Thanks, Justin, for that. On that note, we're actually going to stop for our tea break. Rhonda, did you want to share anything before we go? Yeah.
So we're just going to take an afternoon tea break. The hotel have provided coffee and tea over here. As we mentioned before, bathrooms are up here. Let's make sure that we're back here, say, by 3:35 for an action-packed last half of the afternoon. Thanks very much, and enjoy your break.
I hope everybody had a good tea break and networking session. We'll get started with the remainder of our program. I'm Brendan Morrissey from Walmart. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to hear from our panelists today. So the topic that we have to speak with you about is APSCA's impact. So as we all know, APSCA has had a major impact in its short history on the social compliance auditing industry already. And some of that has been extremely positive, some of that has been neutral, and some of that has probably been negative. There have been some challenges along the way as well. And what we want to do today is use our time together with stakeholders in the social compliance auditing community to speak about those different aspects of APSCA's impact. The APSCA was founded by audit firms, but that is not the only body of folks who have a stake in this industry, obviously. So what we've done here is we've tried to assemble a group of stakeholders who can speak to the impact of APSCA from their own perspective and from the perspective of the group of stakeholders that they represent. So we have Carmel from the ICTY Ethical Toy Program. We have John, representative of an audit firm, Omega Compliance. We have Scarlett, who is an auditor and is going to be one of our CSCAs announced later today. So 3 different constituencies, and I hope that we'll have a good, robust discussion about APSCA's impact, in all aspects of APSCA's impact. So let's start with the positives. It's always fun to start with the positives first, I think. We're going to have our first group of CSCAs announced in a little while, which is going to be very exciting. We have some full member firms that was announced as well, and it's a really exciting time in APSCA's history. We've also heard about discipline, right? And the point has been made several times that the milestones for APSCA are not just around getting auditors certified and getting full firms into the fold, but also around taking appropriate action with respect to auditors and firms who are not living up to the high expectations we've set as a profession. So we've heard about those things today. But there are other positive aspects to what APSCA has accomplished and what APSCA has done over the last few years. And so I'd like to speak with our panelists about those as well. So Carmel, from your position at the ICTY Ethical Toy Program, and then sort of thinking about collaborative programs more generally as well, what do you view as some of the positive impacts that APSCA has brought to the industry so far?
Well, I guess that the first is actually that it's still here in nearly 2020. Going to some of the points that were talked about earlier. Social auditing has been around for 15, 20 years, but not often enough or universally seen as a profession. And I think that's really a real shame for the thousands of auditors out there who work incredibly hard, doing incredibly difficult jobs in often very difficult circumstances. So I think an organisation that is there to support auditors, to raise awareness about the professionalism of auditors and support the growing professionalism of the industry is really, really important. And I think the fact that APSCA is here today and has a vision for the future is something that should be celebrated. I think that's really positive. So that's from a kind of audit profession perspective. I think the other thing from a program perspective like ours is we rely on our partners in audit companies and the auditors within those companies to, we rely on them incredibly. And they are, in most instances, the main point of contact and interaction that a factory or a facility that's being audited has with our program. So for us, their competency, the integrity that they work with are all really important, and being able to rely on an organization like APSCA for programs like us is something that I think we're all excited about how that's going to evolve in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, you're not the only collaborative program out there. Obviously, we have others represented here today.
I don't know.
How do you see, or have you seen a positive impact already in the ability to look across kind of the common qualifications of auditors who are, from firms that are executing audits for multiple collaborative programs, having APSCA as sort of a standard-setting body or as a baseline qualification for kind of entry into the field for collaborative program auditing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it is a multi-stakeholder sort of initiative or organization, the fact that in the creation of the competencies frameworks, many people were involved. We were involved in that, but many others. We often say the same thing, that there's too much duplication of auditing, there's not enough collaboration. Most of the social compliance audit programs will look at the same things. We're all looking at hours, wages, etc. So it makes sense to have a common framework of competencies that we're all looking to work against. So I think that's really positive. It helps us all be focused on what good looks like. It helps us focus on training and assessment in a more consistent way. That should mean people can move through organizations with actually lower levels of disruption and investment.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as well about the different industries and geographies that the collaborative programs cover. Obviously, your program would be different than Avedis's program in the sense of different types of industries being covered, but the common attributes of what it takes to be a good and robust and social compliance auditor and to audit with integrity are in common. So one would think that if APSCA can sort of set the standard for what good looks like in terms of competence and integrity, that would allow you as a collaborative program and Avedis and others to focus on the things that differentiate their programs and allow them to specialize in their space as well.
Yeah, totally.
John, what about from your perspective as a firm representative? Your firm is a relatively new member of APSCA, but what have you seen in terms of the positive impacts of APSCA to date?
Well, firstly, if you'll indulge me, so it just feels great to be here as an APSCA member. Some of you will know our story. It took a while for us to go through that process. Actually, if you look at photos of me from 4 years ago, I was 35 pounds heavier. And so it's not that I stopped eating burgers, it's just going through the APSCA membership process that has got me to this stage.
We'll talk about that when we get to challenges, I think.
But seriously, it's been, we're very happy, and I'm delighted that we are now a member. I've been supportive, Amiga has been supportive of APSCA from the outset, despite the challenges that we faced. And I think one of the benefits that we see has been the validation of many processes and standards that we already had. But before APSCA, there was really no way to properly measure yourselves against the industry. My colleagues and I sometimes we always have a conversation about when we have a new scenario. And when we start working with a new client and we go through what if this happens, what if that happens, and then we always say, well, this thing could never happen. That's like a 1 in a million chance of it happening. And I see some of you smiling, because you know that 1 in a million will always happen at some point. And then you have to deal with it. And whilst APSCA and the code, is it called Randy's code or is it called the APSCA code? I'm not sure. I've heard it referred to as both.
It depends on whether Randy's talking about it or someone else.
But I think to have a point of reference when you have those scenarios is just really helpful for an audit company, and it's the audit company that gives the auditors who work for them the confidence to do their jobs. And so I think that's been one of the main benefits that we have realized and will continue to realize as APSCA evolves and develops further. The other thing I want to mention is, we're one of the smaller audit companies. There are other audit firms represented who have many more staff than we do. But even for ourselves, we sometimes face challenges in terms of the handling and the management of auditors and specific cases that we may be dealing with. And to be able to have a network and an organization where just being able to consult or share or talk through some of those issues really is of great benefit. And so far today, I've heard a lot of reference to discipline and to having that enforced. And I agree with everything that's been said, in that the people who are passionate about what we do are the people who are not scared of those things. They're not afraid of attempts to raise the standards and to be more professional. The only people who are worried about the standards being raised and about our professionalism being endorsed are those who aren't professional and perhaps don't have the ethics and integrity that hopefully everyone in this room has. So we've only just started, we've only just become a member of APSCA, but we are delighted to be part of it, and I really think that it'll go from strength to strength.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, John. Scarlett, we haven't heard much from auditors today, and I think it would be great to hear your perspective on, what you think the positives have been of APSCA's kind of emergence and then presence in the industry from the perspective of an auditor working every day in this field in this very difficult job.
First of all, I'm very happy to be the first 1% to certified social compliance auditor. Is very proud. I think the good point for auditor is it give a chance to auditor to show the professionalism to the factories and companies, because before when we go to a factory and conduct a social compliance audit, we need to do many things. Actually, it's a really tough job. We have to know many regulations, laws, and program requirements. And sometimes the factory staff, managers, they ask us, as you do so professional job, I guess if I want to be a social compliance auditor, it must have some kind of certificate or something like this. And I don't know, what should I say? I can say you have to pass the exam of the company. Yes, but I mean, pass the exam of my company is also not so easy. But APSCA give an international certificate is how to say, it's more a professionalism, and sounds like it's more reliable for the factories. Okay, this is the first one, and also I think APSCA will create a more transparency and healthy environment for this whole industry. It's also very good for the audit. Then the auditors can just focus on their job and don't need to have some bad effect from the whole industry. And I think every auditor like their industry have a good reputation. Okay. Certainly, it's also very good for auditors' career development in future. Okay, I think that's all for auditors.
Now, I especially love that first point about kind of the outward sign of your professionalism and your integrity. That's not just your firm that's putting you up. I know SGS has very high standards, but there's a third-party body that stands for these things that is now saying, this person meets our expectations and as a professional in this industry that I think is really important.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Let's turn to some challenges then as well. So there have been, we've talked a lot about the positives, and I don't want to diminish that, but there have also been challenges. So, there have been immediate impacts on firms. There have been administrative burdens, there has been cost, there have been restrictions on your ability to send out auditors that you would have previously sent out on audits to lead audits with the new code and standards. And so, but yet not all of the benefits of this organization have yet been realized. So we've not gotten to a critical mass of certified auditors, and some of the benefits in terms of reduction of duplication of training and kind of qualification auditors have yet to be realized. So I thought it was worth spending a bit of time to think about, at this stage in APSCA's history, what are some of the challenges that we've seen that we've seen as well. John, could you talk a little bit about, from a firm perspective, and now I guess, fully having signed on to the code and standards and things, that may or may not have presented you personally with challenges, but perhaps it has, and then also, kind of from the firm's perspective, what have you seen in terms of challenges in the industry from where APSCA is right now?
Well, you've mentioned cost, and certainly that is an issue, but there are, I would point to two different types of cost. One is the direct cost to the audit firms in terms of putting auditors through the certification. There's the cost of membership for the audit firm. That's one cost, but I think that is part of setting up the organization, and I think there are going to be administrative costs to have a really professional setup like APSCA, and although we haven't paid much yet, we understand that that's necessary. I think that where it's more challenging is when that has an impact on our clients. And I'm not just saying, for example, okay, your audit before we were an APSCA member was X, now we're an APSCA member, it's Y. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking more about the way an audit company and its auditors can work. So, for example, if you have a client who likes to work in a certain way, and that way may not 100% be consistent with the code which we have all signed up to. And I think that is starting to be an issue. It is for us. I don't know about, I only talk for Amiga. I don't know about the other audit companies, but that is starting to be an issue. And I think that the way to navigate through that is to communicate more fully to brands and companies who use audit firms the details of the code, not just the details of APSCA and what APSCA is and what it stands for, all of which are essential. But I think that the brands and companies using audit firms need to know the rules under which we're now working. I think we all fully support those rules, but it's quite difficult for an audit firm to say to its largest client or its second largest client, who's responsible for a good percentage of its revenue, no, we can't do it. And so I think that's one area where there needs to be a little bit of work to educate our clients, not just on what APSCA is and what it stands for, but actually educate them on the code, because for the audit firms to do that individually with each of their clients may not be received quite as well. If they understand that we're now working under those new rules, I think it will be a lot smoother for everybody.
Carmel, what are you seeing as challenges?
I get so for us as a program so far, the challenges of supporting APSCA and working with audit firms who are members of APSCA and the approved auditors from those firms that we work with being registered with APSCA has not been a problem at all. That's all worked fairly straightforwardly. The challenges, I think, are probably maybe 2 or 3. One is, I guess I'm often surprised when I speak with audit firms and they don't know much about APSCA, even though they may be founding members of APSCA. So I find that a little surprising, and it kind of undermines the benefits of it. So I think there is a communication job to be done by the firms who are members of APSCA to their own staff, because it's a bit weird to me that people seem to register but not really clear as to why they're registered.
Luckily, I think Justin cleared up everything earlier today when he read the code and standards to us. Thank you, Justin, for that.
So I think, but because I think there's a lot of positives around APSCA, and there's and it's still young, and I appreciate that. There's a job to be done, I think, to share with the marketplace the benefit of being part of APSCA, supporting it. I guess one of our challenges that we've worked around so far, but could be a more significant problem in the future, is that whilst the audits that are done on our behalf are done through APSCA members, we as a program are not an APSCA member and cannot be an APSCA member, as far as I understand it. So we also have our own internal team who are highly specialist, many of them from audit backgrounds for many years, and those specialists who know our program better than anyone else are the people that we use when we're investigating a significant concern at a factory or a very sensitive issue at a factory or whatever it may be. But some of the companies that we work with can't accept a report from us because it's not from an APSCA registered auditor. So there's a little bit of a strange thing where we would say that we've probably got the best of the best working within some of the programs, and yet they can't be part of APSCA. And then I'm not sure if I was a bit confused with what was said earlier, but around that membership will become open to programs in the future, but although the technical staff within programs will be assessed, they couldn't use that APSCA assessment, which to me seems a bit pointless, therefore doing it. So I think there's some challenges around how programs work with it as we kind of evolve. And I know, so that's from our experience. I know from other programs, there's probably programs who, particularly in the certification model, where they may be operating at a higher standard already, and how does that gap get kind of acknowledged and addressed? So I don't think these are challenges that can't be overcome, but I think there's certainly things that we should, make sure we're aware. And I guess again, the other area will be how, I know we're still very, very audit driven, but as the audit process and methodology evolves, how do we kind of look at areas of conflict of interest potentially that are still assessments but not necessarily traditional social audits in the future?
Perfect, thank you for that. Scarlett, from an auditor's perspective, and having gone through all 3 parts of the exam process now and having to navigate that, with the support of your firm, obviously, yes. What do you see as what were your personal challenges, or what do you see as the challenges that have been posed by APSCA so far?
Oh, okay. I think first, APSCA has its own criteria beyond the audit firm criteria. So to meet that criteria from APSCA, the auditors need to always learn some new things, not only relying on their existing knowledge. And auditors now face more competition from different audit firms. And also, I think because in future, maybe APSCA also have some requirement during the audit, especially in the ethics side. Maybe it has some requirement, ask auditor to report something, and also some audit criteria in the I mean, like during the technical criteria, maybe they have. It may be different with the standard of customers and audit firms. So if it is different, it might confuse the auditor, which one should be priority. I think APSCA should think about it, how to solve it. And also talk about the exams, because many auditors still not pass the exam. So for the new entry auditors, it's quite, how to say, if they fail one of the exam, they have to wait quite a long time. And now many brands and programs already have requirement that you have to have a certificate. So it might be a little hard for them to do their work normally. So I don't know, maybe there's any way to make that term be shorter.
To ease
Yes.
those burdens on the individual auditors.
Yes, yes.
Interesting point there about how that helps to illustrate that the code and standards apply not only to firms but also to auditors as individuals.
Yes.
And so as you encounter clients, John made the point of having to have difficult conversations with clients about what is allowed and what is not allowed in terms of the code and standards from a firm's perspective. Also, as a newly minted CSCA, you'll have to be thinking about, am I doing things in the way that, if the client's asking me to do this, but that's not consistent with my professional
Yes, exactly.
obligations. Yeah, and what do I do, right? And so that's part of being a professional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great points there. Thank you. Let's turn now to the future. We've talked a lot about the present, about the past, but it'd be great to hear from all three of you as well about potential benefits that have yet to be realized, but you still see kind of sitting out there that you think APSCA will have on the industry in the future, as well as potential challenges, right? So the situation has not fully played out, right? We're here to celebrate some major milestones today, but really the flags and watch-outs for the organization going forward are just as important, because we need to make sure that as an organization with the mission that we have, that we can continue to navigate that future. So Carmel, can you talk a little bit about what you see as the future-looking benefits and challenges for APSCA as an organization?
Sure. So I think for me the real big prize for us as a program and for anyone who's a purchaser of audits is that you have an organization that is respected, trusted, and provides a great service. So the Ethical Toy Program provides a certification. So when you're in the business of certification, there is a real responsibility, because there's a consequence of not certifying a facility. And that consequence can be ultimately that their customer will no longer trade with them if they don't have a valid certification. So what we do is serious work and has serious consequences. So we spend a lot of time, resources, and money to ensure that we work with the right partners who have very high standards, not just process and policies, but actually live by those standards around integrity. And if we can stop doing some of the work that we do in that due diligence, because we're working with a member of APSCA and individual auditors from APSCA, then that's going to be really positive. So it enables us to focus on other things. So social auditing often gets a bad rap when things go wrong. Auditors individually, I think, don't often get the support that they're needed when things go wrong. So having an organisation that we can all point to be proud of what it delivers and what it stands for, and that people have confidence that when there are bad players or weaknesses, that there's a robust way of managing that through, will be really, really positive. I think it's what the industry has needed for some time, and that's why it's so good that 3 years down the line, APSCA is here and going from strength to strength. And I think there's definitely a need for it. And when it achieves kind of the activities under the 4 objective headings, I think we'll all benefit from that.
Yeah, perfect. John, from your perspective as well, what do you see as really important for APSCA to be focusing on to make sure that we land this thing the right way, and what watch-outs would you have for the organization?
I think what's really interesting is talking with some people today, listening to everyone who's spoken, and you just mentioned the word trust, Carmel, and I just think that is really a key word, because if people, stakeholders, our clients, our auditors don't have trust in APSCA and what it stands for, then ultimately it will lose credibility. And my own view is that if we and APSCA and everyone connected with APSCA doesn't have credibility, then the initiative will go the same way as the other initiatives which were set up with great intentions, and I agree with what was said before. They were, because I was involved in some of those discussions and some of those attempts myself, and they were all attempted with the right motivation, but for whatever reason they didn't materialize fully. And with APSCA, there's a recognition of some of those full steps, and so the basic foundation is there, but the trust has to be maintained, because if the trust goes, then the credibility goes, and it's really not going to have a bright future. So, the reason I really want to underline that is because we're talking about some of the really difficult issues which we will be faced with, such as, and I hope you don't mind if I'm specific, because we've spoken about the code, and we've spoken about some of the dilemmas which we face. I mean, one that just jumps out to me is consulting. Now, we are an audit company, and we do audits. There is a lot of consulting that goes on in the industry too, and the code is very clear about when you can consult and when you can't. But I think that if those rules aren't properly enforced and members don't hold themselves to account to follow those standards, then the credibility and the trust will disappear very quickly. And so, I'm not painting a bleak future, I hope. I'm just pointing out that what I think is really important. But I think the really positive thing is, based on what everyone has said, it seems to be we're all thinking that same thing, it seems to me. One other challenge I think it's important to mention is, if you look at APSCA is a relatively new organization, and is going to evolve and change. But if you look at some of the statistics today, they're really interesting in terms of the percentage of auditors based in China. I think the number is over 30%, right, of the total, and yet represented on the exec board, the stakeholder board, there's no one Chinese. And I think that the ethnicity, the ethnical representation for the organization is also important for the longer term, not just gender, but where people come from. Because I don't think it necessarily requires that it's the boss of each company be the APSCA rep, for example. It could be somebody else. But I think going forward, it's really important, because we have involvement with other research and other benchmarking where those are parameters for doing well or failing, quite frankly. And I think that perhaps over the medium to the longer term, then perhaps that there can be a look taken at that. But overall, I'm really positive about the future. I think it will go from strength to strength, and we're really excited to be part of it.
Thank you for that. Scarlett, from your perspective as well, what would you call out as for the future of APSCA as an auditor?
Okay. As an auditor, I'm really looking forward to the continuously professional development from APSCA. I really like that plan. I hope APSCA can provide some international training that can consider the CSR risk from the whole world. I mean, many CSR non-compliance, many issues may not happen in some specific area. Like in China, you're very rare to see human trafficking, this kind of thing. But maybe in other areas, there's this kind of thing. So I hope in future we can have this kind of training in the professional development. And also this can be communication between auditors from different regions, which is organized by APSCA. I think for auditor, it's almost like this.
That's a fantastic point as well. Carmel mentioned earlier that it can be, APSCA can be seen as a focal point and, sort of the hub of social compliance auditing for companies, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it can play that role for auditors as well. We saw the statistics up on the screen, 4,100 enrolled auditors at this point, 96 countries, all those languages represented. Think of the experience across that diverse community and the way in which that might be harnessed for continuous professional development and professional networking and all of the benefits that come with treating this as the profession that it is.
Yes.
And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do you have time for questions from the audience as well? Or, yeah. We have a great panel assembled here. The topic, APSCA's impact. But if anyone has questions for the assembled group here.
Does anyone have questions?
Thank you to the panel for really an incredibly edifying discussion. And Brendan, the questions were wonderful. I think you've sort of asked all the key ones. I would maybe ask each of you just one piece of advice if you had to give to Rana, to the board on something to focus on fairly in the immediate future. What would that be?
Okay, can I do 3? Sorry.
So you're gonna do John and Scarlett's job for them?
No, they'll be different. Well, I'm not sure if it's advice, but so I think so the big watch out for me is balancing the urgency and the excitement that we all have about APSCA kind of getting to where we see it getting to and delivering what it can do, versus kind of rushing stuff and that impacts the quality of the work that's done. Not that that's been done so far. I'm not suggesting it has, but I think when there's such an interest and excitement and support for the end game, I'd caution taking time to do it right. And I think the other thing is just around, and maybe it's in line with the development, but just communicate more to a wider audience about who APSCA is and what it's here to do. Because I think, and that's again bound to take time, but your example about the Bar Association and those kind of things, there's known organisations, if I'm a financial accountant, if I'm a lawyer and whatever, and it'd be great to put some energy and resource and funds behind really creating awareness about who APSCA is.
at the risk of sort of repeating some of what's already been said, I think a key thing, actually really reinforces what you've just said. I think awareness is a really important thing to focus on, and I go back to my earlier comment. I don't just mean awareness of APSCA, but I mean awareness of the APSCA code and the elements of the APSCA code which brands and companies who are using audits and want audits done on their factories, they need to understand the content of that code. I don't think at the moment there is that understanding. And please, that's not a criticism, because it's a very new code, and it's only just being understood by all of us fully. But we are already doing audits for our clients and for brands and companies, and they don't have that understanding. So I really think that that awareness is key. And my second word, I would just say credibility once more, because that links back to the mission statement of APSCA. And if without the credibility, then we will all have a problem. If it maintains credibility and trust, then it will succeed, in my opinion.
I just wanted to add one point, which kind of goes to John's point as well, which is that the people that actually buy audits are actually factories and manufacturers or farmers or whatever it is. It's not really the big retailers or whatever. They request them or instruct them, or, as we do. But the people who actually are buying the audits, who are the ones that are often, subject to bad audits, good audits, indifferent, probably certainly the ones I know nothing about APSCA. And they're the key kind of purchaser of them. So a job to be done there, that they can have more confidence and more value in the audit process.
Since I'm an auditor, can I give advice to auditors? Yeah, I think all the auditors right now is worried about the exams, right? So my advice to auditors is take this seriously, but don't be worried about it. Because all the exams is all about what you are doing now every day. If you are already certified as a social compliance auditor and you have sufficient experience, you are registered, because if you want to be a registered APSCA auditor, you have to at least 100 mandates do the social compliance audit, right? So you have a sufficient experience. But why I say take this serious? Because although you have sufficient knowledge, it doesn't mean you can pass the exam. You have to read the handbook carefully, because there's many other things, not only about knowledge, but also about how you prepare it, how you behave during the exams. And also during the exam, because it's an international examination, so there's something that you're not familiar. Because in the special kids, there's something that may not happen in your country. It only happens in other country. You might know the standard, but because you not always encounter this kind of problem, so it's better follow the a suggestion from APSCA, read the materials like International Labour Organization Convention and some SA 9000 rules, the policies, and do enough preparation. And at last, don't be worried about it.